At 1:47, the ward was quiet in the way hospitals only are when the world outside is asleep. Fluorescent lights hummed above the nurse's station, monitors blinked in steady green rhythms. Somewhere down the corridor, a cart rattled once, then stopped. And in room 312, a patient's heart rate began to fall. By 1:58, it was gone. At 2:01, 2 rooms away, another monitor sounded an alarm. At 2:04, another patient stopped breathing. 3 deaths, 1 hallway, 17 minutes, all pronounced within the same hour. The night staff had seen deaths before. This was a hospital. People came here when things were already going wrong. But this felt different. The timing was wrong. The clustering was wrong. And the silence afterward, the way the ward seemed to hold its breath, was wrong. By 6:30, as daylight bled through the narrow windows, a junior doctor stood in front of a whiteboard and circled the times in red. 2 o'clock, 2:03, 2:11. He hesitated, then added dates. Different patients, different diagnoses, same hour. At first, no one said anything out loud. Hospitals run on statistics, and statistics demand patience. Coincidences happen, especially in places where death is routine. But over the next 6 weeks, the pattern returned. Again and again, always the same ward, always the same narrow window of time. Always just after 2 o'clock. One night it was a post-operative patient who had been stable for hours. Another night, an elderly man whose vitals had been improving. Then a woman expected to be discharged later that morning. Their charts shared no obvious connection. No shared medications, no shared doctors, no shared diagnoses. And yet, they died like clockwork. At 2 o'clock, by the third cluster, the whisper started. Nurses compared notes in the break room, lowering their voices. Someone joked about cursed equipment. Someone else mentioned a cold draft moving through the ward at night. A veteran nurse, who had worked hospitals for 30 years, said quietly, "I don't like that hour." No one laughed. Administration ordered a review. Pharmacy logs were audited line by line. No contamination, no dosing errors. Toxicology screens came back clean. The water supply was tested. Oxygen lines were inspected. Ventilators were replaced. Every machine in the ward was recalibrated. The deaths continued. At 1:52 on a Tuesday night, a resident sat at the nurse's station watching the clock advance second by second. He told himself he was being ridiculous, that exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But when the first monitor alarmed at exactly 2 o'clock, his stomach dropped. The patient coded, then another, then another. 3 more deaths before 2:30. The investigation escalated. External consultants arrived, epidemiologists, forensic pathologists, risk analysts who specialized in explaining the unexplainable. They mapped the ward like a crime scene: airflow, electrical loads, shift rotations. They checked whether the same nurse, doctor, or technician appeared at every incident. No pattern. They checked cleaning schedules, chemicals, maintenance logs. Nothing aligned. Autopsies told a frustrating story. No poison, no trauma. No single organ failure connecting the cases. On paper, the causes varied: cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, sudden collapse, but the timing was identical. Pathologists began adding notes in the margins: unusual clustering, time-linked event, cause unclear. Around 2 o'clock, the ward seemed to change. Night nurses described the air feeling heavier. A strange quiet settling in, as if sound itself had been dampened. One nurse said the monitors felt slower, their beat slightly delayed. Engineers found nothing wrong. Another claimed she smelled something metallic in the hallway. It was never there when anyone checked. A senior physician known for his skepticism dismissed the rumors publicly. Privately, he started coming in at night. He stood in the hallway at 1:55, arms crossed, watching doors and listening to machines. After the third night in a row when a patient died within minutes of 2 o'clock, he stopped joking about coincidence. One theory blamed circadian rhythms, the idea that the human body is most vulnerable in the early hours, when blood pressure dips and respiration slows. It sounded scientific, reassuring. But it didn't explain why this ward was different. Why other wards in the same hospital showed no such spike. Why the deaths arrived in clusters, not singles. Another theory blamed staffing ratios, fewer hands, slower response times. But code records showed staff arriving quickly, sometimes faster than during the day. Then came the incident no one could dismiss. A patient collapsed at 1:59. He was resuscitated, stabilized, moved to intensive care. At 2:06, in a completely different part of the hospital, he arrested again and died. The hour followed him. Word spread beyond the hospital. Families demanded answers. Lawsuits were quietly discussed. Administrators released carefully worded statements about ongoing reviews and no evidence of systemic failure. Internally, something had shifted. Staff requested transfers. Night shifts became harder to fill. Some nurses admitted they held their breath, and the clock approached 2 o'clock. A chaplain began making rounds at 1:45 unrequested. A junior nurse asked a question no one liked. Why does it feel like something is waiting? No one answered. The ward was eventually closed. Patients were redistributed, equipment replaced again. When it reopened under a new name, with fresh paint and new signage, the clock kept ticking. For a while, nothing happened. Then, 3 months later, at 2:02, a patient died. Just one this time, but it was enough. The final report arrived months later, thick, meticulous, filled with charts, timelines, and cautious language. It concluded there was no identifiable cause, no foul play, no mechanical failure, no statistical proof the pattern exceeded chance. The hospital accepted the findings. Unofficially, the case was never closed. Doctors who worked those nights still remember the sound of alarms echoing down the hallway. Nurses still glance at the clock when it nears 2 o'clock even years later, even in different hospitals. Some say it was exhaustion, stress, a mind searching for patterns in chaos, but a few believe something else. They believe whatever happened in that ward didn't follow rules that could be measured. That the cause was never found not because it wasn't there but because it left no evidence. And that the hour itself mattered, a threshold. A moment when systems fail quietly and bodies slip past the point of return. The ward still exists today, though its number has changed. Patients sleep there, machines hum, staff work through the night, and every morning, when the clock passes 2:01, nothing happens. But for those who were there, that hour will never feel empty again.